Times and Tides. By Elton Gar. Rich grabbed the girl, dragging her out of the way of a chair that slid across the floor as the cruise ship rocked in the storm. Her mother had started moving to save the girl, but had been forced to grab the railing to avoid being knocked to the ground. The girl pulled towards her mother, trying to free herself from Rich's grip, but he held on. There was still debris flying around the room, and trying to cross it to get to her mother would be too dangerous, so after a short struggle, he wrapped both arms around her so that if they couldn't dodge anything, it would hit him. Two of the ship's crew, who had also been trying to get to the girl, now focused on the furniture. Most of it was small enough to not be deadly, but you could still break limbs, and simply being thrown around the ship could be worse. After another 5 minutes, the room was clear, and the storm had calmed enough that he felt safe letting the girl go. She rushed across to her mother and began to talk while pointing at Rich. Rich was glad to see they were both safe, but he was exhausted and had several bruises and several more scratches, so he started towards his cabin. He was going to take full advantage of his free drink plan. But before he escaped the room, a young man in a ship's deck crew uniform approached him and said,
"Are you Rich Emerson?"
"I am,"
Rich said, confused as to why anyone on the ship's crew would be looking for him or recognize him.
"The captain wants to see you,"
the man said. That couldn't be right. No one on the ship knew who he was, and they weren't likely to care if they did. He considered that perhaps they wanted to thank him for making sure the girl was safe, but there hadn't been time for the captain to hear about it, and certainly not time for him to send someone to find Rich. That came back to job. Sometimes when people heard he worked for the CIA, they assumed far more than it meant. He wasn't a field operative, and he certainly wasn't any type of law enforcement agent. He was a data analyst. One who hadn't put any of that on the paperwork when he signed up for his vacation. Still, he was technically a CIA agent with top-secret security clearance, and likely the only person on the ship with it. The bridge was both considerably larger and considerably less impressive than Rich expected. Much of it was filled with computer screens showing all the things that you'd want the crew to know, and leading him to question how they had run into a storm without any warning. But outside of that and a few maps, it looked more like an office than anything else. Someone had even put up a Far Side cartoon that made no sense, but was technically relevant to a ship. The captain was a short, middle-aged man in a white shirt with epaulettes, and as he saw Rich, he put on his hat. Something that, from the condition of his hair, he didn't do that often. He gestured towards one of the crew's chairs and said,
"Mr. Emerson, please sit down."
The captain waited for him to sit, and then took his place in his own chair. He then leaned forward and said,
"I am made to understand you work for the United States government."
"I'm a data analyst for the CIA,"
Rich said. That wasn't technically a secret, but most of the time he left the CIA part out because people asked less questions that way. The captain took a deep breath and said,
"I'm assured you can keep a secret."
"That's a big part of my job, and technically I have top-secret clearance, though that is less impressive than you might think. Sometimes the things I need to analyze have names or details in them that you need clearance to have, at least in context. On the other hand, if I share that information, I could be executed, so I keep my mouth shut,"
Rich said.
Well, this is going to top those. 12 hours ago, the President of the United States contacted us. She claims to be sending a message from 2080. We were skeptical, but she predicted the storm and where you would be on the ship. She also had access to my records. They aren't top secret, but they're not public either.
No one on the ship knew Rich worked for the government, and it wasn't all that easy to get the names of CIA agents, even low-level analysts, so he said,
"I'd be happy to look at any information she's given you. I don't know as much about storms as you, but I'm trained to spot lies in data and people."
You misunderstand. The President of the United States, she asked to talk to you by name.
"Did she say what she wanted?"
Rich asked, glad he was sitting down.
She said it was classified, and you are the only person on this ship she trusted with it. I brought you here instead of a private room where you can talk to her, because I wanted to warn you and give you a chance to share your incredulity without insulting someone who claims to be important. James will take you to a room where you can speak to her in private.
It was too much to take in. Why would the future contact a cruise ship? And why would the president from 60 years in the future trust him? Most importantly, how could he verify any of this was true? You didn't have to be from the future to see weather patterns or know things about people.
Do you have any reason to believe she is actually the president?
She's on an official channel, so while I can't confirm she's president, I can confirm she's not just some nut with a radio. Or if she is, she's a nut that knows a lot of things she shouldn't,
The captain said. That would have to do for now. So, Rich allowed himself to be led from the bridge to a small office where he was handed a phone.
This is Agent Rich Emerson.
Rich said as he picked up the phone, not entirely certain how to address the woman. The voice that answered was smooth and powerful. A voice of someone who had authority and knew how to use it.
This is President Merlene Spring. I've got a great deal to tell you.
That voice did more to convince Rich this was indeed the President of the United States than anything the captain had said. It held a tone of authority and power. Anyone could have it, but you didn't hear it often, just like you rarely heard the name Merlene.
How can I help you, ma'am?
He asked, keeping his voice respectful but neutral. The less he gave, the more likely she would talk, and that would make her more likely to make a mistake.
First, I'd like to make it clear everything I'm about to say is top secret and compartmentalized. I know what we're about to discuss, as do the Secretary of Defense and my Chief of Staff. You will be the fourth. You will not share this information with anyone until you report directly to the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Do you understand?
I understand, but she doesn't regularly meet with data analysts, and if I tell her why, she's as likely to have me locked up than have a conversation with me. How do you expect me to speak to her, and why do you think she would believe me, ma'am?
Rich said.
I will give you several codes, including your current president's code for the nuclear football. That will get her attention. In addition, I will give you forewarning of several events in the next few weeks to verify what I have told you, as well as potentially saving a few lives.
Yes, ma'am.
Rich said, picking up a pad of paper and a pen that was sitting on the desk. Some of this probably shouldn't be written, but it seemed vital he remember everything.
Good. There is a 5-year-old child named Greg O'Connor living in New Orleans. He will grow up to be exceptionally dangerous to the United States of America. As President of the United States, I am giving an official order for the CIA to stop him.
You want me to tell the director of the CIA to kill an American 5-year-old child inside the U.S. borders?
Rich said.
A single life for the good of the entire world. He will lead the world away from the true path and into darkness.
The woman said. She still had authority in her voice, but there was a hint of zealotry.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm going to need more information before I tell anyone to break the law. Especially that law. Perhaps, if you could explain what darkness he was likely to lead you into, it would help make the stakes clear.
Rich said.
It's not that simple. There are events that must not be changed. Just trust me. This is about the survival of our people.
President Spring said. That made it less clear. Perhaps it was him knowing the failings of his own time and superimposing them into the future, but the way she said "our people" made him feel uncomfortable. Still, he wasn't ready to dismiss or accept anything yet. He needed more information, so he said,
Perhaps if you could give me some details about why he wants to hurt the United States.
It's not just him. His entire party wants to destroy this country.
Isn't it his country, too?
Rich asked.
You can't understand them the way we do. They are wrong for America. Wrong for the entire world.
Wouldn't they say the same thing about you?
They would be wrong.
The president said. Rich didn't know what to say. He wished he knew how this communication worked. Was this a one-time message? Could they send objects or people here? With no information, it seemed best to tell the truth.
I can't promise the CIA director will believe me. I've never met her. But I will pass along your message.
I have read a great deal of history on your current director. If you give her the information, she will do the right thing.
President Spring said. Rich knew the right thing, and what she wanted was the same thing in this woman's mind. What he didn't know was what it was in reality. He spent the next hour transcribing the woman's order. The plan was simple. Greg O'Connor was a brilliant child and neglected. They didn't need to kill him. Every life was a series of 1,000 events. If you changed a few of those, then you changed the ones after. In this case, they'd keep him away from a few key events, and he would never rise to power. And if he had no power, he wouldn't be a threat. The woman meticulously avoided saying what that rise to power was, but Rich had a theory. Once he had all the information, he thanked the future president of the United States. He then walked back to the bridge of the ship and said,
Captain, were you able to verify the exact date that message came from?
According to the signal, it was Wednesday, November 5th, 2080.
Rich stuffed the paper full of codes and future events the president had given to him into his pocket and said,
Thank you, Captain. I'll need to get off the ship at the next port and fly back to D.C. Until then, I'm going to the buffet.
Rich sat in the office of one of the most important women in the United States, the small piece of paper he had written the notes on in front of her. The woman said,
I'll keep you in the loop, sir. And make sure they change the code on the football.
never taking her eyes off Rich as she spoke. She hung up and said,
He verified that the codes you gave me were accurate, and the captain of the cruise ship verified he believes your message came from the future. So, I'm not going to have you arrested for espionage or treason yet. But the story you are about to tell me better be good, because I'm losing patience.
I spoke to the President of the United States, or the woman who will be president in 2080, assuming she's not lying, and I don't think she was. She told me there is a child named Greg O'Connor in New Orleans, who is a major threat to the United States. But I'm pretty sure she was wrong about that. Though she likely does believe it.
You don't think she was president?
the director of the CIA asked.
I think she was. I also think she was desperate. She sent the message from Wednesday, November 5th, 2080. Assuming nothing too major has changed, that would be the day after the presidential election. I think she just lost her re-election effort and wants you to change the past of the man who just beat her.
We both know that doesn't mean he couldn't be dangerous.
The woman said.
But it doesn't mean he is, or that she's not dangerous. They could be fixing their mistake. Or they could both be good and just dislike each other. Or they could both be terrible, and this is irrelevant. But no matter which, it's definitely domestic policy, and there is a reason we're not allowed to interfere with that.
You're the one who talked to her. What do we do?
I think we trust the process. Without significant proof, it would be unreasonable to do anything except assume that the person who won is who the voters wanted. And who are we to say we know better than them? Besides, she was willing to risk the dangers of contacting me, which makes me suspicious. I almost just threw the paper away, but the choice is above my pay grade.
Rich said.
It's above mine, too. But I know the guy in the Oval Office. He's going to say to trust the electorate. And I'm going to reassign you to New Orleans.
The CIA director said.
I agree, someone needs to very discreetly monitor Greg O'Connor. But I think I should be assigned to watch the other potential threat.
Rich said.
I assume you mean Merlene Spring. We should watch her, but even with a name that is that uncommon, we can't be sure we'll get the right person. Besides, it would be easier to have a female agent watch her.
I've been thinking about that. If I'm wrong, it won't matter. But she contacted me because she trusted me. My best guess is that she was on that ship. If I'm right, she's 8 or 9 years old, and I pulled her out of the way of a chair during a storm.
Author's note.
I've considered taking a cruise for a few years. There are a few reasons I haven't. Time is one of them, but the bigger factor is that I live pretty much as far from an ocean as you can get in the contiguous United States. And while a couple of days on a cruise ship might be fun, It sounds less fun if you have 2 days of driving tacked on to either side of it. And it also makes it seem considerably less affordable. So I don't actually know what it is like on a cruise ship firsthand, and certainly not what it's like in a storm. There may be inaccuracies. If you know more than me, I hope it didn't take you out of the story. That takes us to the politics. This was closer to our modern politics than I typically get. If you saw any major parallels, I hope that you will try your best to examine your own beliefs rather than just assume it's the other side. Because while I won't pretend that they are the same, I also won't pretend that either side is perfect, and you can't control what anyone else does. So even when the balance is well in your favor, you still do more good by considering your own actions before other people's. If you enjoyed this, you can sign up for my free weekly newsletter at scifi.com to get a free book and free short stories every week, or you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/Elton to get access to over 40 patron-exclusive stories. Thank you for your time. Elton Gar.